Adventures in Imperfect Living.
Hey, greetings, folks. I'm Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Back in the saddle, a couple weeks off. I wish I could say it was actually off. We never do it right. And people tell us, why don't you guys learn how to actually, take a break if you're going to take a break? We haven't done a podcast in a couple weeks, but we've been doing tons and tons and tons and tons of work behind the scenes. Super excited. So soon. I know we keep saying it. School of Mary will be launching very soon. Have some topics we want to talk about. How did you want to approach this, Jennifer? You put down some topics in the database. I put some topics down in the database.
Yes.
But we didn't talk about which topics are we going to tackle in which order, which sometimes I go in there and go, based off of the narrative that I have in my head, here's how it should go. I just didn't even, again, so many things going on. We're just going to do a show.
Well, I think we should just sort of ease our way into our show and just kind of have the lighter stuff at the beginning. And then as we progress, they get heavier, meatier, richer.
So let's start with genocide. And,
No. Let's talk about maybe some of the obvious things that are happening with our family. It's been a while.
You think it has?
We've shared?
It's been a while since we shared, but the last couple of shows have been talkie talk shows, and we haven't had an interview in a while. So those are coming soon. You're starting back to school. Or school's already started back.
School has already started.
And that changes our schedule of how we get the interviews done.
Yes.
Just the summer. Everything everything has been topsy-turvy, Willy Wonka, I don't know. Willy-nilly? That's what I was trying to say.
That's what you meant. Pull up the schedule for that topic because I want to make sure.
Which one?
For school.
School.
Because it sounds like we're going right to school.
All right, let's do that.
Because we're already inside the month of August. So for us, school has already begun. And so not only has our family dynamic radically changed because our summer is probably the least busiest time of the year. I know some families are flip-flops.
I did not feel that at all. I felt like this summer was incredibly busy for our family. More so than normal. It caught me off guard how busy the summer was.
Okay, so how do you quantify that? Like, what were some of the things that you're referring to as your evidence?
Well, Ben getting his internship and then learning how to drive at the beginning of the summer. And so that really
Well, that was May. May was crazy.
Well, I consider that kind of going into the summer. But then that led into June. And June, we were already kind of behind because we'd canceled a bunch of the interviews. So we're scrambling to get a lot of the interviews and other podcasts recorded for the summer and getting ahead again because we started off the summer behind schedule, and that just
behind schedule with
all the work stuff.
Okay,
but then with Lily, she is at home. You're trying to keep her busy all the time, so I felt like there was a lot more driving around, and there were sleepovers and that kind of thing, and so I felt like that was going on a lot. Walter moved it back into the house because he's getting ready to get married and his lease ran out, so he needed temporary housing. So that changed things. And then we're painting and doing changes, and then all the School of Mary stuff. So I feel like while it's not directly our family, I felt like this was one of the busiest summers we've had in a long time, which is also why over the last couple of weeks when we didn't have a podcast ready to go, I'm like, oh, well, because it's like something had to give, and that's what gave was the podcast for the last couple of weeks.
So I guess, depending on who you were in the family and what roles you had to do what, our perception of busyness was one way, and it's definitely radically changed now that school's back in our life. It really probably the most dramatically affects Lily and myself because we are now going to be out of the house full-time for 3 days of the week, which is kind of new to us. Normally, we do all of our operations kind of from here and during the school year and only be 2 days out of the house to meet those academic goals and whatnot. But in order to get ready for that, I had to undergo basically annual teacher refresher training, and that they graciously allowed the teacher assistants to even participate in that. Really, this is for the lead teachers where Lily goes to school and where I'm very blessed to be able to have a small role in being a part of their staff and to be able to help out. But they do allow the teacher assistants, which is me, to participate and also to benefit from that kind of information. Because, we got to get out of summer mode and into school mode and get our heads back in the game. And so I've been through this a couple times already. This is my third time being a part of the teacher training seminars. But this year had I don't know, there was a tonal shift is all I can explain. There was slightly more alarming warnings that we were being given and being asked to sort of pray about and consider in terms of like screen usage and the negative impacts of more studies coming out revealing just how detrimental it is on young children, exposure to screens. And of course, whenever you hear talks like this, and if you're a parent of a young child, I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, I kind of start feeling guilty very quickly because you realize how complicit you can easily be in participating in harm to your child, which is like the last thing any parent wants. And we keep thinking that we're, can escape that reality, but we're all kind of in it. And we're all kind of being negatively affected too, because it's hard to moderate one's screen usage. So that was a really confronting bit of information that we were given, a teacher training that I'm still trying to sort of reconcile what is the best way out of it. So if the claim is, anything over 3 hours a day, and that's all screen exposure, that's laptop computers, devices, any screen that you're looking at, if it's more than 3 hours a day, there's going to be some kind of a negative effect on your brain. And depending on how old you are, will determine also the effect of the damage. And we're like, wow, but that's like everybody. Like the world is pretty much online now. How do we get around this? How can we be set up to succeed? Everything seems kind of dire, and I was feeling kind of anxious with all this information. The American Academy of Pediatrics is now saying no child from birth to the age of 2 should even look at a screen, like at all. Just keep it away from babies. And then from 2 to 4, like half an hour a day at the most. So they're really trying to limit that for developing children. But once you get to 18, you really shouldn't be on screens more than 3 hours a day. And that's where I really just like, are you kidding me? Like, what world, what planet are you living in? Because how can you even participate in society? Because there's that much screen demand of all of us. Email, work, whatever, it's on there. And how can we really win? So I tried to get down to the nitty-gritty, like, well, what's the problem? What is really the issue that these studies are trying to reveal? And there was definitely some attention given to the colors of the images that we're looking at. So they're saying that the more vibrant, the more motion, the color of the screen, the more there is a drain on our mental resources for processing that kind of visual. So that even if you change to grayscale, you're protecting and safeguarding your limited resources that you have mentally. So little things like that. It's like, well, okay, I guess I can try to do more grayscale of even iPhones. And I don't know about like PCs, but I know Apple computers have a way of grayscaling out all of your screen. But then when you try to do that, you realize a lot of the apps or the things that you need to locate are actually defined by color. You need color in order to find the things that you're looking for because it's not limited to just text only. So even that is a bit tricky. So I'm just trying to like absorb the weight of all this information and then just trying to use my God-given intelligence to do like, well, what is right? What can I do? As a Catholic today, trying to do what's right, stay close to our Lord, but also, live in a responsible way in the society of which I am in and also protect our children. And it's a really difficult thing. So I was processing that in early August. And then we had this other layer thrown on top of that. And that was because we're in a school, all schools, in order to be responsible, you need like shooter readiness response protocols in place just to be safe, because unfortunately we just live in a world where we have to now plan ahead for the unthinkable and the terrible things. Like if an active shooter were to be on the school's campus, what do you do? And in order to save lives, you just need to have that knowledge, that plan easily accessible in your brain so that when you're in this heightened state, you can still do what needs to be done. And that's always kind of a scary thing to go through. Like, you have to think about it. You have to plan accordingly. And but you don't want to. This is not a fun topic to think about. But what I was grateful for was they actually allowed us a chance to run through some of the drills. So we did have a local sheriff come to our school and give us this great conversation. And then we also had a chance to sort of practice it. And it's like, all right, what will we do in a drill? So that we can just have more confidence in our response to a traumatic event. So that was helpful, but also hard to process. And so, yeah, going back to school this year, I had a lot of things to consider. And I needed time to sort of process it all. It was not as uplifting as I wanted it to be, but it is, but it's also hard. And I know you are now, Greg, every time I come back from teacher training, you almost can't wait to see what dire thing did you learn at school today. I mean, you're conditioned now for me to come and unload all this latest study and latest findings of this study and that study and how we can be better. But it also kind of shows us how broken we are at the same time. I don't know. It's just really weird.
I have thoughts about the whole thing, but part of it is, and you and I talk about how I seemed to retain a lot more memories and just recall on things from past years, right? Being able to recall, like, past birthday gifts from the last 10, 15 years. That's not something that you can do or want to do, right? Many times I feel like it's a curse that I can do these things, that I don't have a photographic memory, but I do have a retention pond that stuff goes in, and sometimes it can't get back out again. It just goes into this collection bucket, and I can't control what does and does not. So to that point, you saying all this new information and the new things to worry about, now that you've been there, and this is your fourth year there with Lily, third year as a teacher's assistant, I'm actually hearing things on repeat. Like, I feel like I've heard you come home from this teacher training and reiterate things that, yeah, this is exactly what you said last year. The only thing I didn't hear you talk about this year was temperaments. It sounded like they skipped the temperament talk. But even when we had to go to the high school, or not even orientation, like the parent high school meeting last spring, they presented a lot of the same kind of scare information about the phones. And what is frustrating about it is they simultaneously want your child to have technology. So they're scaring you to death, but at the same time saying that everything's going to be on Google School Class or whatever,
Yeah.
And so I don't really, I get, I'll say I lose my patience, but not in an angry way. But I after a while, I kind of check out when I start hearing all of the fear. It's kind of like why I don't watch the cable news channels, because it's just, after a while, it's just, what can we do to scare you? And nothing against the administration or anyone that's giving these talks, but my observation is they are big purveyors and they seek out that kind of doomsday type information. And again, it's not a critique on it. That's just sort of my observation, that I've seen those kind of people. I've seen the people that they just kind of live in this state of wanting to be prepared all the time. And so they keep looking for, what else do I need to be prepared about? And what else is going to attack the world, versus trying to live in the present. And so after a while, you have to go, okay, well, do we trust God that he's going to protect us no matter what negative circumstances come our way? Now, having said that, again, going back to some of the things that we've dealt with in our own family, I worry about, did we allow some of our kids to have a phone too early? Did that play a role in their falling away from the faith or their deepening of the faith? And I don't know, because I look at two of our kids who seem to have the same level of technology availability, and one has gone one way and one's gone the other way, and so sometimes it feels like it's a crapshoot. It doesn't matter what technology you give the kid. It's the formation that goes around it and how much the child is actually going to absorb that formation. So I get very torn, and after a while, and here's a downside, and I think it should be cautioned. After a while, the numbing that I feel, right, because so much it actually has sort of a it has this an unexpected and undesired side effect, which is a numbing happens to the thing. It's the sky is falling, right? The sky might be falling, but you've told me so many different ways that the sky is falling, and you have, every time I talk to you or hear from you, it's about the ways that the skies are falling, that after a while I stop believing you that the sky is falling, so that when it really does start to fall, well, it's the boy who cried wolf. I don't know what to believe anymore. And so I stopped listening, and not to you, but I stopped listening to the person who is constantly trying to share this information with me. It's sort of like people that I know that will buy into every single prophecy or visionary or whatever, whether or not it's approved by the church. Just today, literally just today, a youth minister who in the Archdiocese of Atlanta, who I haven't talked to in a long time, but I've been quote unquote friends with on Facebook, right? Rarely see this person post, but just today she posted a bunch of stuff about the rapture. And I'm like, what? And it's the same kind of thing, right? It's like you say it enough, and it sounds promising enough. Now you have a Catholic youth minister, and she's been a Catholic youth minister in the Archdiocese of Atlanta for 20 plus years. And now it worries me. It's like, well, has she been sharing rapture trap, or not the rapture trap, the idea that the rapture is really going to happen, which is a very Protestant-based thing that didn't come about until the mid 1800s. That idea, that theology, and it's completely erroneous, and time and time again, it's been proven over and over again how wrong it is. Has she been promoting it? So it's the kind of, well, that sounds like an interesting prophecy, and they suddenly their lives become all about the negative thing that they just read about, and they revolve their lives around the latest interesting thing. Technology, listen, there are 5 bagazillion studies. Is it all good? Absolutely not. I need to stop sometimes, and that's kind of the reason why during Lent I say I'm not going to use my technology so much, or I'm going to put limitations around it, because I do think it's very smart to put borders around it. But how they figured out 3 hours a day your brain starts turning to mush, I don't know. And I don't know I don't know, why should I believe that person over the other person says, no, it's okay, you're okay with 10 hours a day of use. Well, then you've given me a new job. I have to go back and research each of these people and who they've worked for and who's paying them money and who blah, blah, blah. So after a while, it's like, okay, why don't we just go back to what the church teaches about prudence and moderation, all things in moderation, right? And are the things that we're using bringing us closer or further away from God? That's the barometer that I want to go off of. And I think for some people, in different seasons, quite honestly, like I said, during Lent, I don't want to be on technology so much, because it's a season that's given to us from the church to really ascertain how much are we actually, absorbing. That's kind of my thoughts on this.
Yeah.
And so I when you come home and rightfully so, very worked up about the things that you heard, because they have you spend 3 days listening to these things. It's inevitable that it's gonna, some of it's gonna.
Right. And I don't want to give the impression that it was all dire and bad. There was lots of amazing information about classical education that is just beautiful to hear. And you're like, yes, this is what I want to do. I'm in the right place. And it just feels very, very affirming.
And that stuff is stuff that I'm more interested in. Because then you're right. And this is what I love about the classical education that Lily's getting right now. Mm-hmm. The fact that she's getting a very well-rounded education that is helping her to think, but it's also drawing her closer to God at the same time. It's a very much, I feel like I've said this to people lately. I don't think I've talked about it on the show. So I actually have my degree. I have an associate's degree in liberal arts. And I've actually been embarrassed by that degree for many, many years. That it's just because it was always kind of considered in our generation that that's the degree you get when you can't make up your mind. And I also feel like I stumbled into the degree. I didn't fully understand what a liberal arts degree was in the in the 1980s. Liberal arts was that's the next step up from undeclared, right? You go from undeclared. Well, if you don't know what to declare liberal arts then, and just start, But even then, the liberal arts that I took, it wasn't a very clear pathway, right? They said, well, you got to take X amount of philosophy, X amount of this, X amount of this, X amount of this, but not helping you see how it draws you into being a better, well-rounded person. It did. It taught me, and I kind of had to come up with this on my own. It taught me how to learn, right? Which is very good. But what and we had a conversation just recently with a student at Wyoming Catholic College. She's home for the summer, and talking to her, and I told her, I said, I've been going around to some of these Catholic liberal arts colleges and going on to their websites and seeking out their reading lists and looking at John Senior's list of 1,000 good books and trying to actually read more of those books, right? To actually take the time. It's like, well, let me read something else. Been reading Shakespeare plays for the last few weeks in my spare time, just because I want to put something else in my brain that's going to exercise my brain, but it's interesting at the same time. So I read, Julius Caesar last week, and I'm finishing up Taming of the Shrew, and I plan on reading Henry V because I never read Henry V. But there's other things I want to read, and so I love that idea of that. And so when you come home and talk about those things and the benefits of it, and so Lily's history class this year, ancient history, I'm like, doggone it,
that class is actually taught by a friend of ours.
If anything,
which is kind of cool.
I get really frustrated that. Oh, no, not frustrated. That's the wrong word. Sad, disappointed, remorseful. None of those are the right words. What's the word to say that you have a longing and a wish that you could have been brought down that particular path?
I guess you're grieving.
It's a little bit of grief, but even that sounds too strong. I look back, and so this is actually something that, and we'll talk about School of Mary here in a little while. One of the things that School of Mary allows us to set up, so this is not anything firm. We brought this up to Mac and Catherine when we were having dinner with them a couple weeks ago. I love the idea of having a part of School of Mary devoted to helping adults who don't have an interest in going back to college to work together to go down a pathway of sorts of some sort of classical liberal arts education. And a lot of what Lily's doing as a freshman
high school
for ancient history. I feel like, because like even last night I said, Lily, you want me to read it to you? Because part of it is like, I want to read it, what she's reading. That it's using all of these talks from Sophocles and the Iliad and everything is blending together so that she's getting a stronger idea of science, mathematics, history, and the arts. And it's all pulled together, and you see God in the middle of all this. And I love the idea of creating a book club or something that's a little bit of a lighter fare on School of Mary's site so that there's a monthly book that together we all work through. And even you're doing something through the school that you got enlisted in and kind of going the same route of the Well-Read Mom group, which is this a national thing?
It actually is. There is a way, there's like a database online that if you want to join an existing group in your area, you can basically inquire, put in your zip code, and find out who is already running a group in your area. That if you, as a mother, just have a desire to read better books and to also have that sense of community with other moms, other women who also want to increase their reading of really good material while at the same time fostering their friendship and sharing that walk as what women go through, these societies started to sort of populate throughout the country. And I think it actually is international. It's not just limited to this country.
I just had this idea, Jennifer. I don't want you to spend a lot of time talking about Well-Read Mom. Their website is wellreadmom.com. We just need to have them on the show. They'd be a good guest.
Right. And I wrote down
I'm actually going to write that down on my to-do list.
I wrote down a list of the books that we're going to get to read. So if you've never heard of this, but you're intrigued, let me tell you what is slated for us to read. This is once a month. We'll get together and we'll discuss our experiences and insights into reading a particular older work. So this year, we're going to be reading a selection from Confessions by St. Augustine. We're also going to...
Are you saying St. Augustine now that we went down to Florida?
Yeah. Isn't that how you say it? Or Augustine, however you choose to say it. Charis in the World of Wonders by Marley Humans. Dracula by Bram Stoker. Practice in the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Four Quartets by C.S. Lewis, True Grit by Charles Portis, A Severe Mercy by Sheldon Vanauken, Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Wow, and more. So,
Man, you have that memorized.
well,
You're not
it's
looking
a
at
good thing
anything.
I wrote it all up there to prepare.
I didn't know it was on the screen. I'm going, I keep looking over at you. I'm like, wow.
I got it.
How do you know all these?
Yeah,
It's
I
like
don't know. So I'm very excited to challenge myself in this way with reading really good works and to get to know the authors through their writings and to sort of just observe what I do about it. I'm not even sure what's going to happen, but I'm just excited to do it now.
Hey, can I say one thing? The Practice in the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. I actually picked up your copy and looked at it this morning.
Yeah.
Are they the Well-Read Mom website? Are they like giving you the version to pick up the ISBN number or anything like that? Because I know you bought some of these used off of Abe Books.
Well, maybe they have, but since I have a new sign up and I'm trying to acquire the reading material before I get their welcome packet. So if they do, they might.
You'll want to buy a new copy of Brother Lawrence.
Why?
Because the version that you got, and it had all of these red flags because I read the introduction and the forward, right? It's like a 1982 modern language version of it. And so they basically are trying to soften the words, and that's just huge red flags.
Yeah,
It's like
I need an
it's like
older
whatever
copy.
the 1970s and early 80s, whatever they were like, we need to make this more readable for everybody.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
And I think it was a Protestant publisher taking a Catholic work and transforming it, and that also was a red flag. I was like,
Well, fair enough. But Bram Stoker's Dracula is fine, right? I don't have to
I can't
be selective of the version.
I think
of
you'd
that.
be all right on that.
So I'm very excited to start that. It's going to be
The Confessions one, because I did look at that also, and you might want to look for a more classic version of that, because they called it, instead of modern version of Augustine, it's Word Up with Augie, and that was kind of weird.
That's how you know.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
Word Up.
To be suspicious.
Word Up with St. Augie.
Oh, my goodness. So I'm very excited about
Word up.
that. We start. We're just a couple weeks away from our first meeting for the year, and I'm looking forward to the fellowship and having intelligent conversations with other adult women. Okay, which is something I can't really achieve in this house.
What was the name of the band?
Very well.
That had that song "Word Up," and the guys were wearing.
You're not even hearing anything I'm saying.
They were wearing the jock straps on the outside of their pants.
You're still stuck. I'm not
You
even
know the
going to
name
try
of
to.
You know the name of the band.
Sadly, I have the visual because I've seen music videos on MTV in the 80s, and I can't unsee some of those things. So let it stay there. Let's not bring that into the modern era. Let that memory fade into oblivion. So other things that are new for our family this year is, you may recall, we're not big on sports in the family. We don't have a bunch of baseball players and football players and soccer players. We never had that. We had video gamers.
We're not athletes, is what you meant.
Yeah, we're not an athletic family. We're play music or do other kind of arts type family, like writing, music, and video games and drawing. That's kind of the bucket that the Willits kids have all kind of fallen into. We have tried sports throughout the years. We tried to do it. I tried to get Lily in dance when she was 4, or gymnastics. Nope. Failed.
Walter with tennis was one of the saddest things you've ever seen. He really wanted to play tennis. And he just would not chase the ball.
No, he just wanted to stand in one spot.
If the ball came to him, he would swing.
He was done.
But they tried karate.
Yes, that was okay for a little bit.
But by middle school or high school, none of them had any interest in organized sports.
And we, as good parents, didn't push it. We just wanted to save the money. It's like, oh, good, you're done. I want that money back for groceries.
Well, I mean,
that's kind of where I was with the whole thing.
The tennis thing really, really made me jaded. I was just sitting there watching, our son at practices. I was like, come on, buddy.
But now we understand more. I mean, Walter, he had some legitimate physical ailments.
Oh, don't give him any excuses.
We didn't really know were there. The whole EDS thing. Now we know it was there. It's like, okay. So here we are now with our last child going through high school. That's Lily, starting her freshman year. And they really encourage for PE, you have to do something. If you don't do a sport at the school, then you need to do something at home, where I kind of keep track of it. So I thought, there is some value in being a part. Well, there's a lot of value being a part of a team, but some teams are better for a certain temperament of children than others. Since Lily doesn't do well with the whole competitive angle that might be present in, say, like volleyball, basketball, other, sports for girls at the high school level, cross country was something we were really curious about, because with cross country, you're just really trying to improve your own time. And yes, it collectively can benefit the team at large for cross country, but there's a little less pressure on being amazing all the time. You can grow. There's plenty of time to excel in the sport according to your own personal strength and weaknesses. And that seemed like a better speed and better pick for Lily. And much to my surprise, she was really open to it, and she agreed to just jump in. The bad news is we got started very late. I'm not really up on sports stuff, so I don't really understand timeline for conditioning for a new sport, and the seasons of sports is completely unknown to me. I had no idea that they were asking about cross country now back in May. They were already trying to get signups in May. And I just when I saw the email in May, I just well, we're not in cross country, delete, it doesn't apply to me, delete. So now here we are in August, and we're just kind of coming in at the last minute, not having had the benefit of doing any cross-country conditioning over the summer, which is something they really recommend. But that's okay, because we're learning. And this is fine. This is just where she is. She was happy to do it. And so now we're going to have a new component to our family dynamic of taking on the busyness associated with cross-country meets and the traveling that now goes with these events, which I'm not used to doing at all. Waking up super early on a Saturday morning just to be a spectator for her to run, I've not done that. But you know what? She's our last high schooler. I'm willing to dig a little deep in my mommy reserve of resources to be there to cheer her on, and also to meet some other parents along the way, which is good for my own socializing and growing my friendship base, which is something that I need to actively pursue, because if you work from home, you know how hard it is to make new friends, because if you do everything from home, you're kind of self-isolating yourself. That's just one of the cost of that kind of work life. And that's very much what we deal with. Our friendships are naturally limited by design because of the work we do from here. So I have to take advantage of these opportunities to get out and just push myself to be social, to be prepared to talk to parents who I don't really know much about, but I just need to do it. So that's a game changer. So I have two brand new things to hopefully expand my friendship bubble with the Well-Read Mom group and the cross country group. And then also I have a new work colleague in Latin, because I have started assisting in all 6 Latin classes that are offered at our school. So that's a brand new world there too. And I really hope that I just want to be a blessing to the lead teacher. She's a super amazing woman who is really like a Latin scholar in her own right. And she got her master's degree from UGA in classical languages. She's highly, highly trained. I'm looking forward to what I can learn from her. And so that maybe I can even bring some of this knowledge into our show, because it is the language of the church. And I'm very excited to learn how to be a Latin translator, which is really the goal of learning Latin in the classical model. It's not to empower you to converse in Latin with your everyday friends, because it doesn't go anywhere when no one can understand what you're saying, but it's really so that you as the student can pick up any Latin text and decode it and read it with confidence. You will basically be your own translator. That's what the Latin program at our school is designed to teach the students, which I think is something that's amazing, because now that we've been going to Latin Mass for almost a year and a half, we're very accustomed to looking at our 1962 missals, where we see the Latin translation on one side and the English on the other. And I like to challenge myself. I don't know if you try to decode by reading just the Latin side to see what words you can pick out on your own and what you might remember, and how you can use reason to sort of get you close to the meaning, the root idea of a Latin constructed sentence. So hopefully over the course of the year, I'll be able to do that a little bit better and And I'm excited about it. I love history. And I have a love of Latin. I didn't always have it, but I definitely have it now. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to the information I'm going to be exposed to. And also I get to help someone. And I just want to be a blessing to this lady who's doing a tremendous workload for all these students. Hopefully we can find our nice little working rhythm with each other so that we can she can be freed up to just teach, and I can help do some of the administrative work so that she didn't have to. So that's my goal this year. It's a lot of goals. But another thing I wanted to talk about before we shift over to School of Mary and all the fun stuff with rosaries is as part of Lily's homework assignments at the beginning of the year, she has to take a health class. Most high schoolers have to take some version of health and PE. Usually freshmen like to knock that out at the freshman year so that they can move on to bigger and better things for the rest of their high school academic life. So one of the requirements, and this was a requirement for us, was to watch the 2008 documentary called Food Incorporated. I do kind of remember a little bit as I was rewatching this with her. This was Lily's first time seeing that content. And as I was watching it, it was slightly becoming a little more familiar with me, but it's still quite an alarming documentary to watch, especially if you live in America where we just love our experience of walking into a grocery store, seeing all the beautiful, brightly colored packages that are available all year round. It just never seems to go out of season. It's just always there for you. And they have the great labeling, green pastures this, or, they like to use green, because green means health and that'll make you feel good and it'll make you buy that thing. And then we just buy it and we kind of hope for the best and we put it in our carts and then we just go home and we make our dinners and feed our families and repeat. We do this over and over. But then we also have this other reality that, why don't I feel good? Like, I'm not feeling as healthy as I want to. I'm always tired or whatever. And so this documentary really kind of, I guess whistleblower is one way you can describe it, but it tries to pull the veil back on the systematic approach of how food is manufactured in the United States of America and how, we're kind of kept in the dark and we really don't know how well this food is being made and we don't really know where it's coming from like we think we do. And so it's trying to affect a positive change so that consumers in this country can have this information so that we can make an informed decision about what we choose to spend our money on at the grocery store.
So why was this a requirement for her? What class was this for?
For health class.
This was a health class.
Yeah.
See, okay.
Well, and
again, it just felt like an alarmist homework assignment.
What made me naturally curious was this documentary came out in 2008. We're at 2023 right now. I have a feeling there's some updating that was due. So I did a quick search.
Netflix puts out a new documentary on this kind of stuff like every other month.
Right. And now there's so much information that it's almost information saturation in the market about food. And it's getting hard for people like us who just want the truth of something. It's harder to find the truth in the sea of data that we're being presented with. So again, we kind of have to use our God-given intelligence and try to ask reasonable questions. Is it better to buy something from a local farmer who has maybe better ethical practices with how he grows his food or how he, butchers his meat over mass-produced from something far away that is all about shelf life preservation? Which is the better option? I think most people could see that there's a bigger value in purchasing locally if given the chance. But it goes over how economics is behind everything. So it is one of those situations where you're like, well, gosh, what can we do? But there's still a lot you can do. We can thankfully read labels more. All that information is out there. But it was really to help Lily, as a soon-to-be 15-year-old girl, to start asking better questions herself instead of just blindly reaching into the pantry and whatever I have and just assume that everything in my house is 100%, perfectly healthy. You're not going to get sick. It isn't going to hurt you. You're not going to get a stomach ache for 4 days if you eat it, because the assumption is that it's all good. Just like I assume as a consumer that everything I buy at the grocery store is for my good. That when company X made that product that I want to buy, they were thinking about my health. But the truth is, they're really not concerned with health as much unless it makes them money. Then they're concerned. But if it just makes the money, that's really what they want. And so you have to try to just be aware of that reality so that you're not duped as often. But it definitely got me thinking about just our own pursuits of health and what we're doing in our own household to just try to be healthy. I mean, we have talked about diet and exercise multiple times on our podcast as we have been trying to seek out, our own health and to preserve our longevity as much as we can so that we can be around for our grandkids, so that we can play with our grandkids. And I mean, I know that's what I want to do. I would love to be able to go in a swimming pool with a grandbaby and just play. And right now I'm really concerned I'm not going to be able to because of my foot. It's like I can't even go in the water without potentially hurting myself. But I think we're in an okay rhythm now. I mean, we did our first time buying a cow from a local farmer, and
A quarter
share of a cow.
I would totally buy half next time.
Yeah, and we are almost...
Quite honestly, I would buy the whole thing if we had a freezer space.
If we had the money to upfront
the money, yeah. But it was totally worth it.
Very, very good investment, and we haven't depleted everything yet, but we're down to just the roast cuts and things like that. And now that we've done it once, I think we can make better cut selections going forward again.
We apparently like the hamburger a lot.
Yes.
We went through the ground beef.
You can make a lot of ground beef. I should probably have had more converted to ground beef. And anyway, great deal. So I would highly recommend that, where you can control like what the cow eats. So you can choose a corn-fed cow or a grass-fed cow. So we went with a grass-fed cow because we thought, well, God intended the cow to eat grass. Let's do that one.
I had to drive 2 hours each way to pick up the meat, but
that was tougher. But
so there was a gas cost in there. But
you're right. All things considered, it was worth what we had to go through to acquire it, and I totally would do that again.
The burger's just crazy good. Crazy good.
And I wish we had a way of getting the other cuts of meat,
chicken and pork.
Chicken and pork. So there's some farms that
the butcher that cut up the cow. Actually, they had signs out there. They process for others. It's just I think it would be a matter of finding either the same farmer or other farmers in that area that do chickens and pork, because that would be great if we could just get everything all at once. Right.
I forgot that you mentioned that. And if you've never done this, what you have to remember or realize is that there's usually two entities involved. There's the farmer who manages the livestock that you're interested in, and then there's the meat processor as a separate service with a separate fee. So you have to find the farmer with the animal and then find the meat processor. And thankfully, there are areas that will have websites to help consumers get in touch with this information based on where they live. So we're totally going to do that again. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of how our school year has sort of kicked into gear and the things that we're doing personally. We're still loving going to Latin Mass, and we're just more and more in love with that liturgy. The more we attend, it's just so beautiful. But I guess now we can just shift over to things.
I mean, there's a lot of things that I want to talk about, but I don't want to because of the time and because we've already spent a lot of time talking on other things. I think this is going to be a shorter show than normal because, as I said at the beginning, we're dealing with a lot of things. But just to give you an update, School of Mary is cranking along. The Total Consecration Program completely done. It's ready to go. It's ready to launch. That part of it, at least. One thing that we went back and forth on was, and we talked about this on the show a while back, the idea of changing the way that we do rosary requests, of allowing people to ask for a free altar knotted rosary from Rosary Army. And one idea that we were playing with, and we actually did quite a bit of work on, was the idea of making that actually be a learning path, that someone would join School of Mary, go through a series of videos, and at the end of it, they could get access to an online form, request the free rosary, and we would take care of it from there. And we did that, and then ended up having a few people test it, and they confirmed what we felt right away. As soon as we finished doing it and realizing, obviously Jennifer and I can be verbose, and we have a difficult time being very concise in what we're trying to say sometimes, just because of all these years of talking, we go on way too long. And so it ended up being about 50 minutes of content just to get your free rosary. I'm like, no one's going to do this. It's going to backfire on us. And so we stopped and said, okay, this is a good lesson, a lesson learned. Where do we go from this? And you and I kept talking, and over the course of well over a week, and ended up dealing with our developers and other things, we decided that there might be a simpler and better way for us to improve the way that we are doing our rosary requests and actually make it even more open for more people to get them. So that's coming down the road. And so these are all the kinds of things behind the scenes that I don't really care to talk about on the show, just because I don't think that they're all that interesting for listeners to hear about. But all of the things that we're dealing with behind the scenes with Rosary Army, I honestly think this is the busiest year for Rosary Army ever. Even busier than when we first started doing podcasting, busier than when we launched the Catholic New Media Celebration with SQPN. It is the busiest and most productive year ever for Rosary Army has been this year. And so many of these things have just been setting foundations. And it kills me that we're already midway through August. And this happens all the time where it's like all of a sudden I could see the end of the year, and I already see so many things that I want to get done. We wanted to launch School of Mary mid-July, and here we are mid-August. We haven't done it yet. But we're having the conversations with our developers of what it is that we really need to make sure that we're doing. I keep using the example, if you've ever moved into a brand new house, new construction of a house, that the house is under construction and it's like you're waiting forever for them to just clear the land. And then they finally clear the land. Oh, okay, now you're waiting forever for them to pour the foundation. They pour the foundation. You're like, oh, that took forever. But then all of a sudden, like, in a day. I remember one time our first house was actually in a brand new neighborhood, new construction. We were the very first house in that neighborhood. And so we saw all the 14 other homes pop up over that time. I had to drive an hour to work at that time. So I got up really early. I remember getting in the car and seeing there was a delivery truck in the front of the property next door where they had poured the foundation and had all of these 2x4s on this truck. So it's about 5:30 in the morning, saw this. I go to work. I got home about 3 or 4 that afternoon. They had framed an entire 2-story house. So suddenly, where I'm going with this is like the progress on a house, and then all of a sudden they're throwing up the drywall, and they got the roof up, and they got the doors and the windows, but then you get to the end, and it feels like it takes forever because it's like, there's that little ding in that wall, the punch list, the builder's punch list, the ding in the wall, and that light plate only has 1 screw instead of 2, and that toilet seat's on crooked, and it's all these little things, and that's where we're at now. The house has been effectively built. You could move into this house right now, but I'm going through and I'm like tweaking that paragraph and tweaking those images and all these kinds of things.
What about the things I find?
So that the move-in looks good. What are you talking about?
Like if I find things, I'm afraid to tell you. You're like, no,
well,
it adds to my punch list.
It's no, I mean, some of it's on my punch list and some of it's on the developers, but a lot of the things right now, it does go on my punch list. And part of it is like, here's the problem, not just with you, but like with others as well. There's a difference between change that graphic and that entire third hour was long. Well, I'm sorry if the third hour was like, I can't do anything about that at this point because and that's a whole other conversation. Okay. And so when you say that, what if you find something like
a color of this, that would be nice. How about you change the wording on that, or like
changing
cosmetic.
Changing the wording super easy.
Yeah.
If you want to change the color on something, well, you missed out on those conversations. It's like that, and then that's why I'm like, okay, you can bring it up to me, but those decisions were made like 4 months ago. So if you want to change it now, then that's what keeps postponing the launch and the launch and the launch.
Now, whenever the launch does come to fruition, what is going to make you feel like it was a success?
Oh, I probably will never feel like it's a success. Listen. I mean, that's Wednesday therapy right there. When I go to my therapist, I don't know if I will ever be happy with because I would love to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people sign up for this and going through total consecration and seeing, and because I know how it changes people's lives.
Right.
And so I want everyone in the world to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. So I will never be happy because that's never going to happen, right?
Okay.
If we had several hundred people going through total consecration every single month, I would be pretty happy.
Oh, that would be
huge. That would be huge.
I don't think
it's going to be. I think we're going to have.
Not yet, but
I think people are lazy and they don't want to go. They don't want to challenge themselves to something like that. I mean, that's sort of like the blunt way of saying it.
Right. We have to keep inviting people to do it.
Yeah,
So we want you to
yeah.
consecrate or renew, but get consecrated or renew, like immediately, annually. That is the goal, is to get you to do this once a year. And you can pick the date, you can change the date. We want you to do it.
But to go back to your question of what will make me happy is like to get hundreds of people going through it in the first place without us having to be a marketing tool all the time, right? We made it. And this is sort of my downfall. This is a weakness in me. Is I like the podcast. I make the podcast. I post the podcast. I want to move on with my life. I don't like going back and say, hey, look at what I made. I've never liked being that kind of person that has to hold it up and wave the banner. So that's kind of one of the things that would make me very happy is, if quite honestly, if the Holy Spirit just inspired people to show up, if the Holy Spirit touched people's hearts and they stumbled upon it in huge numbers without us having to, because if I have to say, well, yeah, they showed up because we ran a bunch of ads and that's why they're there. And we're going to run ads later. That's one of the things that we're going to do. But I would love it, sort of like the early days of the Rosary Army podcast. People just showed up without us having to do anything. And that was very edifying because you believe it's really of God then. And I really want to get out of the way. And if I see large numbers without us doing anything, then that very much tells me that we were listening to the right thing from God, and that I'll believe that He's pleased by the work. And that's really what I want more than anything, is to know that we did something that is pleasing to God, and well, to know that. And I think that how will I know that? I think by the amount of people that show up and are actually using it. And so, these days there's so many Catholic offerings and Catholic books and Catholic podcasts, Catholic videos, and so in a way, it just feels like, man, this is we're promoting the perennial works of St. Louis Marie de Montfort, and they are some of the most important things in the world, but the world does not want you to see these things. And so part of me feels like it's going to have a very small audience, but I believe with whole heart that the people that do go through this will be changed forever in all the best ways, and they're going to grow closer to Jesus more than ever before. And that's why we're doing it, and that's what I want. But I don't know how to measure it. And that's the worst thing to say from a business perspective of what are your measurables going to be. I'm like,
right. And this is the kind of thing that we cannot measure what God can.
Yeah.
And we have to trust God on that one, because that's often part of the walk of being in a ministry, is you can't always see the fruits of the work that you do. In many ways, that's the lives of many saints. They worked and worked and worked, and many did not see the fruits of their effort. St. Catherine of Siena being the first saint to come to mind, and look at how revered and venerated she is for what she did, but she didn't see it when she was alive.
Yeah.
So we need to take comfort that just because we do all this work and we put all this resources out there, that it's quite possible, Greg, that someone might start with us and then finish offline, and we might not even know that, or they'll just not even sign up, but they'll see something that we reminded them of, and then they just would do it on their own. And again, we can't measure that. It's impossible.
I can't remember if we talked about it. But it's like we've even put together, and if you're watching the video, you see this. I apologize for those of you just listening. But one of the things that we've made available for free at the School of Mary is put together a 100+ page guide that has every day's prayers and journal pages and other resources all within this book, so that you can print it out, 3-hole punch it, and stick it in a notebook to help you in your ongoing journey, hoping that this will be a part of your life. I would love to have had something like this for when we first made our total consecrations, for the notes that we would have put in there to be able to say, how's God moving in my life at that point? Yeah. And we'll keep changing things over time. That's the other thing. I have to be patient with myself. I want everything all at once. I want to launch it. But it's, the way the School of Mary is designed is that our first main offering is this total consecration program. And I had a long conversation with one of our supporters and listeners, Angie. Thank you again for your time, because she went through part of that learning pathway that we had created for getting a free rosary. And she's like, well, what other things do you have? And as I was saying it out loud, I was seeing it more and more. So all these things, and it goes back to the original idea of having these things very much be de Montfortian type of resources that are true devotion, total consecration, the love of eternal wisdom, things to help you to know Jesus greater through His Blessed Mother. And almost taking School of Mary in two parts and having the main part be that, and then anything else that we add on the side is just sort of gravy on top of the mashed potatoes. It's nice to have. Mashed potatoes are still incredible, even without gravy, right? So looking at things like how do we launch this and what's the first offering, it made me feel better to think, well, total consecration is the first offering. For the first several months, that's what we're promoting is go through this. If you're signing up for School of Mary and you're like, well, where's everything else? It's like, you're not showing up at a university that's been around for 100 years. You're showing up. This is our first major offering from School of Mary is these total consecration resources based on St. Louis Marie de Montfort, and you can't go wrong. If you do this, you'll get everything that you really need in life. Anything that we add after that will just be, gravy. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
And why we're spending so much time on this is because we believe this work, this writing from this saint is all about eliciting positive change in your formation in virtue so that you can be a copy of Mary. And if you're a copy of Mary, you're a copy of Christ. And if you're a copy of Christ, then everyone around you benefits and you have a positive effect on your immediate local community. And imagine if we can just do our little part on spreading this news so that more people will want to go on this journey, so that they too can be more conformed toward Christ. And then they affect that change in a beautiful way to the people in their families, to the people at the workplace. It is a beautiful way to live a life in this very dark and toxic world where we need more light, we need more hope, more joy, a reason for how to suffer with grace. We're not saying your life is going to be devoid of suffering. If anything, your suffering might actually increase. But now you'll have the tools to cooperate with it, with our Lord, and you can suffer with grace and you can suffer with joy, which is something that you will find countless examples of that in Scripture on how to suffer the way that is for our gain in heaven.
A couple of things that I wrote down as been praying and working on the whole School of Mary initiative. One of the things that St. Louis Marie de Montfort talks about in The Love of Eternal Wisdom, in number 204, he says, it is true to say that Jesus is the fruit and the product of Mary in heaven. Jesus is the fruit and the product of Mary in heaven. I can't even read my own handwriting these days. Let me say it again, not in heaven. It is true to say that Jesus is the fruit and the product of Mary is where... I can't believe I could... Is, her, is, where? Okay, it is true to say that Jesus is the fruit. Ben, you can take that part out. It is true to say that Jesus is the fruit and the product of Mary wherever he is found. He doesn't have to take that out. Don't write it down.
You sure?
Yeah, it is true to say that Jesus is the fruit and the product of Mary wherever he is found, in heaven, on earth, and in our tabernacles and in our hearts, and that Mary alone is the tree of life, and Jesus alone is the fruit of that tree. So many things in there, right? Mm-hmm. Mary is the tree of life, which sounds different if you think about Jesus is the vine and we are the branches, right? Mm-hmm. But it's go one step back. Jesus' very human DNA came from Mary. All of his human DNA came from his mom. So he was brought forth out of Mary, just as Mary wants to bring us forth to Jesus through her. She brought Jesus to us through her. And Jesus is the fruit of the tree. By their fruits you shall know them. Well, what's the fruit of Mary? Jesus is the fruit of Mary. And that's a really interesting idea. And to have that fruit, you have to have the tree. You can't have fruit without the plant, without the tree from which it came from. And so if we all want and need grace in our lives, if we want to learn something, we do better when we seek a mentor to help us. So if you want to get in better shape, you'll make more progress if you get a physical trainer. You can do it on your own. You can pick up weights and you're going to have some benefit. But if you get a physical trainer, you are going to make progress faster and easier and more efficiently if you get that help, right? If you are trying to, in my case, right, if I want to have better mental health, I've had more progress in the last 2 years since I got a therapist that I work with every single week than in all the years where I was just trying to struggle through all this stuff on my own. So if you want to make progress in your mental health, you get a therapist. If you want to succeed as an entrepreneur, you'll get a business advisor, a business mentor who's already figured out how to do it, who can give you advice. If you want to grow in your holiness, having a spiritual director or a regular confessor is going to help you do that more successfully. If you want to be full of grace, you should go to the person who already is full of grace and let her be your model and your guide to be able to do that. And so that's one of the things that, as I'm trying to figure out how do we encourage people to say yes to this idea of total consecration, to say yes to signing up to School of Mary, to say yes to going into this. And again, it's a free resource, right? We're doing all this because we want you to do it, so we're trying to remove every obstacle to have you do it. Just as Mary removes every obstacle from us getting to Jesus. How do we do this? And so these are some of the things that are jumping out at me. Mm-hmm. And part of it is, growing in humility. That's why I said leave that in there. I screwed up when I was trying to read my own handwriting.
And that's okay.
So anyway.
That's okay.
All right, we had other things to talk about. We'll save it for another show.
Okay.
You're good.
I love it. Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Great.
Pray your rosary every day.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
Go over to rosaryarmy.com, sign up to get a free rosary. Go to schoolofmary.com to be on the waiting list. By the time you watch this, it might already be live. I don't know when we're going to pull the trigger, but it's very, very soon. Talk to you in a few days, folks. God bless.
Goodbye.